son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're here again with mysterious savant, MK Ultra, Mr. MK. Welcome to the show.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself? What all have you been doing today?
What have I been doing today? A lot of chores, a lot of cooking. So yeah. So I guess cooking could be chores, but it's a chore I like to do. So.
I would say some people might live to eat. Some people eat to live.
Yes.
But you strike me as a person who lives to eat because you've always eaten well. And every time you tell me about a meal, it's quadrupled the amount of effort I'm willing to put into a meal.
that's where a lot of people will fall flat. Well, I like to see how far you could you could take things, and if those things, when you take them that far, truly make a difference.
Sure.
To me, and if other people notice it, and if I notice and other people don't, then maybe that's leverage, maybe it's stupidity, whatever,
That's for someone else to decide. Now, is this obviously like something you enjoy doing? How did you stumble upon it? Is it a thing that you did with your family a bunch? Is it a thing that you were encouraged to do, or you just took passion in?
Cooking, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, any of the food related or herbologically related things that you found yourself getting into.
Yeah. So I guess growing up, my parents and my grandparents were always everyone always had a garden, and I always liked being in the garden a lot. And I always found that the time and effort and kind of the keeping to the calendar and what it made you do kind of all year. I found that sort of ritual around it really,
sure,
I don't know, comforting, grounding is a cliche word to say these days, but and then you get food from it too. So my grandparents always cooked. My mom cooked as much as she could. I never really had an interest in cooking too much until I was about, I don't know, 16, 17. And I just was trial and error. I was like, well, I don't want to have that today. I should go and walk to the supermarket and buy what I want to have. I have a job. Why don't I spend my money on some food?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And it's been a slippery slope ever since.
I mean, it is what it is. I think it's very strange how within one generation people have really kind of just forgotten how to grow food.
Oh yeah, not even grow food, cook it, care about it.
yeah, care for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Or create some kind of synergistic system where you're wasting the least amount possible, and what is waste ends up becoming fuel for something else,
Yeah. For all this could be a whole other topic, but for all
absolutely.
all the self-righteous green folks that tout all that stuff. So some of the most wasteful people I know.
Yeah.
So but that's another topic.
No, definitely. Well, but on that subject, so you're 16, you really get into cooking. Do you think that's a segue for what got you into like?
Yeah, I think so.
The brewing and the more adult applications of this shit.
Definitely, because I always like to kind of tinker with stuff, and I always found process-oriented things interesting, especially when they don't necessarily apply to dealing with other people.
Right.
It's like
those are sometimes the best. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I only have myself to blame if I fuck it up, or if anything happens, it's on me. It's just me, so that's okay. I don't have to worry about anything else too much. So there's always beer around in the house and wine and stuff, but I never really was that interested. I remember a couple times my parents would make White Russians in the summer quite a bit.
Nice.
And I remember figuring out how to make those and being sneaky, or so I thought, and got caught like, putting coffee in the Kahlua bottle. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
but beyond that, I was pretty much, I never did like, I never really snuck out and like bought alcohol. I never had a fake ID. My sister did all that stuff. I never really did any of this kind of thing.
Wasn't a priority for you. Yeah.
No. But once it was legal and I could do it, and I was like, any of the responsibilities if I get caught or something happens, it's all on me. Then I guess for a little bit there, I was kind of making up for all the time that I didn't do anything. So not so much as I wasn't like necessarily drinking, but I got really interested in everything to do with brewing for a good number of years, like probably 7-8 years. Anything to do with types of beers, country specific beers, historic stuff, distilling, fruits, what's local, why is it local, how is it integral to the community, why do people age things, what grains do they use, all this stuff. I was just sit around and read on the internet and with books all the time. So yeah, and then do it too. I would brew, and I did. Yeah, it was just kind of a snowball effect kind of thing.
And here, look what I've become. Look what I've become.
Yeah, I haven't brewed, and I moved a couple years ago, and I haven't. When you move, stuff gets kind of like there's like key things I just haven't got around to buying, like like the most annoying bit is all like the tubing you need to cool down the wort.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I want to get back to it though. The hardest thing I found is that it's hard to have like 5-gallon batches of different beers just all like sitting around, just because I'll just get bored of something and I'll have like 3 of them. So this would be great. I'll give this to people, and then I make like 3 more. Then next thing you know, 3 months later, you have 20 gallons of beer, and I drink like 5 bombers of each one, and I just don't touch it. So I just sit there. So yeah.
Yeah, I could see that could easily that could spiral out of hand real quickly.
Yeah, so if I just pretend that even if it's like a mental thing, it's like, oh, I can't do it, then I don't do it.
So like in the process of digging through all of that info, I'm sure there's a lot of literature on brewing beer, as people have been brewing beer for hundreds, thousands of years in some form. What are the differences between brewing then and brewing now?
Now, I'd say, I won't say that, but things now are way more, like everything else. They're much more homogenized. They're much more controlled. They're much more like, there's marketing, there's everything, there's hype all built into this stuff. Now, like, I don't know what the current trend is. I know it's like, the juicy IPAs, the desserts, all that stuff. Whereas in the past, it was like whatever you have locally and you made it work. Maybe it wasn't the most delicious thing, but
it was beer. It was
beer.
Beer.
And then like it's easy for us to sit here and look at historical texts and things like that and have very much like rose-colored glasses for all the stuff and a weird kind of romanticism for simpler times and all that stuff. But I don't think there's anything really glamorous about it. It really was a lot for like, how do we save all this grain from rotting? How do we make like calorie dense drinks that's not poisonous water kind of thing? So.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember, I remember hearing this frequently in all sorts of history lessons across my schooling. But like, at points in history, it was safer to drink the alcoholic beverage compared to the water.
Yeah, I think that still holds water. I think it does, but like it's not like people are sitting around getting like blasted every day on like a couple 6-packs. Like these were like really low alcohol, kind of wild fermented beers, probably in like the small beer kind of range, like 4 to probably more like 2.5% kind of thing. And they wouldn't taste anything like a Coors or a Miller Lite like you go and seek out today.
Yeah, I like my beers to taste like that. Piss.
Piss. You drink a lot of piss from people who just drink water, I guess.
Honestly, it's preferable to Coors Light. I'll happily take that. And like as far as because I mean I understand like the core concept remains the same.
Yeah,
right?
process is process. You know, we've gotten really good and efficient. We being like humanity, you know, unless you don't want to be, but efficient at really honing in and understanding the chemistry going on, and you know, the enzymatic reactions and how to control them, and the best yeast strain to match with the, you know, the enzyme density and diastatic power of certain grains and temperature control, you know, all that stuff in the past went out the fucking window. And it's like,
Yeah,
hey,
sure.
you had a plot of land, you've got a mound of grain, you know, to dry it.
We
you
can do what we
smoke it.
do.
Yeah, you know, most beers would probably be really cloudy, yeasty, smoky, kind of funky, you know. And adjuncts were definitely a part of that, you know. Most things, well, it's funny you're talking about Coors. I think Coors is I don't have it memorized, but Coors I think is okay. I don't think they use. I think it's like Budweiser uses a shit ton of rice and corn in their beers.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's just cheaper and it's subsidized, and you know, then you get all the GMO, the government kickbacks. You know, it's all incestuous.
Oh, I could completely imagine. I mean, there's no way. Even just looking around like the tale of prohibition and the people that benefited from that and how when that went away, I don't know. This is an industry.
That's a crazy tangent and tale.
It is
because all the laws that are still holdovers from prohibition in certain counties and towns that still kind of cling on to that with blue laws, and you know, like in New York, for example, you know, you could buy like you can just go to any like bodega and get like beer and wine, right? Can you get like, you know, spirits though?
Typically that's a liquor store.
That's a
And
liquor store,
even wine is iffy. Some places will have wine. A lot of them typically don't have a really good wine selection. Most places have a really good beer selection. And then you have to go to a liquor store to get a much larger selection of wine and any alcohol.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is the same way, but New Jersey, there's just a liquor store and they have everything.
Yeah, that's how Tennessee was. Every store had everything
together. But yeah, where are we going with that?
Well, effectively, I guess, like I'm familiar with the happy accident of the origin of IPA. Like they that just happened in a preservation technique they tried shipping it back from India back to London, and that's what it tasted like when they got there. Are there any other like maybe scientific developments that occur through the ages of people doing this, or like other happy accidents or brewing styles or techniques?
So there's a lot of paraphrasing I'll do. Like this could be like a huge rabbit hole of study that you could spend, you know, weeks reading about this on.
Sure.
But hops kind of is the preferred like de facto herb these days for you know, flavoring, preserving, and acidifying beer, you know. But prior to hops, and you know, there was somewhat of a revival. I don't know, I'll say maybe like 5-7 years ago. You can still find like funkier kind of beers, but you know, there's a whole host, you know, so many things even in like your common garden were used to bitter and preserve beers instead of hops for the longest time.
Yeah.
You know, anything from yarrow to sage to chamomile, mustard seeds.
Damn.
You know,
that beer sounds intense.
Yeah, it's really good. That was done, I think, a lot in Belgium and Flanders, at least, you know, in recent memory. I'm sure it was done kind of a lot more broadly at some point. But it's really good. You know, it's using kind of these like kind of sweeter Belgian brown ales that the mustard seeds are kind of ground up, and it adds this kind of floral, acrid bitterness that hits you at first, and then it kind of fades away, and it's like hops are kind of like they hit you and they kind of fade evenly. The mustard, I'd say, kind of has like a weird envelope to it. It kind of hits you really quick, and there's like a vacuum, and then it kind of shoots up and tails out. At least for me,
that's kind of like mustard. Like when you take a nice bite of some spicy mustard,
Yeah.
Similar kind of profile for sure. So other, like you were mentioning too, like rice and corn, Budweiser using rice and corn. What else are people using to ferment? Like, what are these motherfuckers doing? I understand that, especially until very recently, people were strictly limited to what was geographically available to them or available through some trade route. So what other types of crazy shit have people brewed alcohols or spirits with?
Yeah, I mean, you could go. I mean, if you're talking spirits, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much anything and everything you could throw in a still, fruit, and loads of illegal things, which is kind of, we'll come back to in a second.
Sure.
But illegal being relative, but I'd say harmful to people to cut corners. But you touched on rice, touched on corn, barley, wheat is another main one. So as is rye, and there's millet, there's sorghum, all these kind of and the derivatives are now what the market is, like ancient grains and stuff, farro and triticale and all these things. But they've absolutely been used in brewing in the past, and this is where even now I think you start to find a little bit of at least I have a bit of a wall. If you really want to get like weird with stuff and say make like a beer that's like the grain bill would be like 80% rye, 20% wheat, and then you wanted to bitter it with like I don't know, chamomile and sage and like bog rosemary or bergamot or something like that. You're not really going to find anything on the internet. A lot of people, you'll find a lot of people asking, why would you want to do that? And saying it probably won't taste good.
Yeah. But
you won't find like recipes and saying like, yes, you should absolutely do this. And here's the proportions and do this and do that. And, like it gets into murky waters really quick. And why is that? I don't know. I think in some ways people are happy to kind of stay on the rails, and their ambitions are. I remade the 60-minute Dogfish Head IPA. I can get really close to that. I nailed it, and that's it. People are happy with that. Yeah, you can do that, but like, why? To me that kind of defeats the purpose. It's like, why would I spend all this time and effort trying to match something that's made in a factory in Delaware that I just go to the store and buy right now?
Right, exactly.
Like, hey, that's not interesting or exciting. So,
well, I think that kind of dovetails with the cooking a bit. I've always felt that way about cooking or baking, especially baking a little bit more, because baking is more scientific than cooking is. Cooking is kind of freehand depending on what you're doing, whereas baking is you have to follow the formula. But I've always loved the ability to understand it and creatively find my way to add my own spin to it. I mean, especially with I'll find a good cookie recipe and I'll want to make that vegan. I won't want to use butter. So it's just, I've got my preferred brands, and depending on what I'm making, I'm using different types of replacements for those things, so that at a bare minimum, that same reaction can occur at some low level and get me some edible product.
It's going to get you to what you want to have, and you'll be satisfied that you did it. So
that to me is part of the fun of understanding a complex system like that, is being able to do the experimenting. So just kind of as a quick aside, like, what's the craziest shit you've ever done
in brewing?
Yeah, like what was the most ambitious undertaking you personally have ever tried?
Okay, there's 3 different ones, and each one I'd say is different for, obviously, it's different reasons, but they touch on different aspects of it. So one was a pure Ragen beer. So it's like a German rye beer. I don't know of anywhere in the U.S. that you could buy this at all. It doesn't exist. You can find wheat beers that are cloudy and have that kind of clove, banana, yeast kind of funk to it. But there's a kind of bastard style that's all rye, or well, depending on how you do it, maybe 80 to 95% rye, with maybe like a 5%, 2.5% of like a malted barley, and maybe 2.5% like a chocolate barley or something to give it a bit of color. But that doesn't exist. So I did tons of reading. I even asked a friend who's a beer manager, hey, I know these breweries make it and you import everything else. Can you import it so I could try it? And he said, no, they just won't even bother.
Wow.
So that was amazing. That was one of my favorite things that I've ever made, just because it's light. It's like the perfect thing for the summer. But the problem with rye is that it's like brewing with oatmeal. So sparging and getting all the sugars off of the rye, the thing gets so compacted and so dense. It is a true, these 6, 7, 8 pounds of dry grain that you have after you boil them and soak them and stuff, it just becomes like a dense like brick of shit that you have to pour hot water over to get all the sugar out. And it's where you can bang out like a batch of like a normal beer, I'd say, I don't know, the true hands-on work part's like 4 hours of everything set up. This took like an extra, just I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours for like a 5-gallon little batch.
Yeah.
So, and that was delicious. It's amazing. It's low alcohol, but it's a huge pain in the ass working with rye. But whenever I start doing brewing again, that's absolutely the first thing I'm going to make, because you just can't get it. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And what about the other two?
So with the other two, the other one is, it's not beer, but it was a botchit, which is a burnt honey mead.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Take the honey and you heat it up, but as you get the honey to this, like cooking it to this, you take it pretty far. It's like deep, rich, like mahogany color. It is
super thick. Yeah.
And you stick a candy thermometer, and if you start taking it, it's like past the caramel,
right.
past the softballs into the hard crack. It starts to, like, dealing with molten sugar like that on a volume of pounds of it is like kind of terrifying, and then
burn the fuck out of your skin.
Yeah,
burn
it's
the
like
fuck out of your skin.
It's fucking terrifying. So, and I did over a fire because
oh my god, bro,
I wanted to get a bit of smoke flavor into it.
I was like, fuck it all, dude.
Yeah, I won't do it. So that came out amazing. But
yes, that sounds really delicious.
That had to ferment and settle for how long did I leave it go? 3 years, I think. I just kind of set it, let it clarify out for a couple months, bottled it up, and just fucking put it in a box and forgot about it in the basement for years. Wow. And that was like special. I'd give to people and stuff, but it like disappeared. Like my dad would just be drinking it. So.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And where was that? Is that a recipe you found from?
That was just researching, and I was like, wow, this is absolutely wild. Like this is really interesting. And mead's a whole other branch of stuff, like melomels and hydromels and all these things with different fruits. And like really good mead is one that you do with like habaneros or something like that. Get some cheese in there. It's really nice, and use really light. You can even use like a champagne or like a white wine yeast, and it gets this very kind of almost like a Pinot Grigio kind of body to it, where it's really light, but then there's this heat depending on the chilies you use, and it can be really beautiful. But again, mead just has to age for like, it's not like an ale or a lager where it can sit for like a month or two and it's good to go. You need to give it like a year or two, for it to settle and start to really meld all the flavors together.
Yeah, and that's also commitment. Like I agree with you. Most people just don't have the patience. They get something that tastes as close as they want to like their favorite beer, and that's it. They just always have it on stock.
And that's fine too. Hey, I'm happy to go get a fucking case of like all day IPAs and just have that around for when people stop by or something. That's totally fine. But
if you're gonna go through all that trouble, like make something special,
And that's part of the fun of it. Like, you can't buy it, And to me, part of the thing is the whole point of doing anything like this for me is that everything's already so fucking immediate. Why do my hobbies have to be fucking immediate instant gratification too? They shouldn't be. Well, you know, and from my point of view, I don't find it rewarding.
They never used to be. That's like a new problem that we have it didn't used to be.
I'm not saying they shouldn't be. If that's what you get off on, you know, go do it. But you know, that doesn't excite me at all. The immediacy of things, you know, convenience. I have a low tolerance for convenience. So
I always love a slow burn. Like I always love taking on something I know is going to take me a couple years to see through. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. There's something exciting about when you start that journey. And
I was going to say, this is the journey. It sounds really, again, kind of cheesy and cliche, but that's absolutely true. You know, like, even if you're going to, I really like, you know, this is a whole other thing too. And I know you know this as well, but the music and stuff, I always like, you know, long songs that are surprise me and take twists and turns and really like wow me and say, oh, wow, you know, I never would have shoehorned that in there or done that with that space or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the good shit. But you know, most people, I saw something the other day and it's really been fucking me up, dude. It was like a statistic that like 70 to 80% of the population doesn't have an internal dialogue.
Oh, I've been seeing this crop up in a bunch of different contexts now.
Is that real, or am I just a fucking idiot?
I don't know. I know I do. I don't know if it's real or not, but you know, to me, this dovetails too nicely into. To me, this is like the other side of the coin of like the dead internet theory kind of thing. It's like, is it really everyone just doesn't have an internal dialogue as an NPC, or is it the internet just flooded with bots already?
Right.
You know,
right.
I don't know. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Some it's
both. A little bit of both can be true. I mean, speaking of methods of control and monitor, like I with any inebriate and with any of the history of like the vilification of inebriates.
Yeah.
I always understand it's more than just that, right? There's always a story to it. And ultimately, it's probably revolving around one group trying to control another group.
Yep.
So, in what ways, if you're aware at all through history other than prohibition, like in what ways, like, because alcohol to me is like, it's the Middle Ages. You're a serf.
Yep.
Like beer is let them eat cake. That's the one thing they have. Like they don't. Their life is bad.
Yeah.
But the alcohol is the one thing they have. But I'm also wary of that in the sense that I know that the people who let them have the alcohol give them the alcohol so that they're too drunk to realize how bad they're being fucked by the king and the queen in the castle.
Right. I'd say that's definitely, you know, it's straddling that fine line between ensuring that you have a blunted, you know, dulled working class, and ensuring that, you know, they're not completely killing themselves too quickly. On the other hand, you don't want it to get totally out of control with other types of inebriants where, you know, people are really going off the rails. And, you know, a whole tangent you can get into with that is with Christianity and wine and what is that?
Oh, sure.
That's a whole other thing. We don't even go there.
Yeah.
But then, you know, there is the German purity laws in the 1500s that kind of cut the head off of all of the different purveyors and community members who would kind of, and brewers as well, who were unwilling to go along with just limiting the ingredients of beer to, you know, grain, water, and hops and yeast. You know, before that, it would be any grain. You know, even wheat was kind of Bavaria was a bit of a thing. So you could read about, you know, in the mountains, this stuff's a little harder to enforce, but in like cities and in major areas, it was barley, it was yeast, it was hops, and it was water.
Yeah.
You know, now why hops? that's a whole interesting thing because, and that will tie into the third beer that I did that I really liked. And there's a whole. I won't get into this too much as well. I'd say do your own reading, do your own research, make your own opinions. But hops have a very kind of sedating effect on people. They're a bit feminizing in a way. With you've all seen people in their 40s and 50s who live on IPAs, and they have the man tits and the big gut. So it's a thing. But that I think was sort of a way to sort of steer people into, and you could really make the leap. And I'll frame it up a bit like that. We're starting to move people from the serfdom and agrarian society and keep them docile as there's this transition to the Industrial Revolution, working in factories and all these things. And you could say the pendulum swings too far the other way, and people are just getting blasted all the time. And then you have prohibition, and now so things are sort of swinging still back the other way. I don't think we're.
Oh well, I mean, and definitely like when we just look into recent history, like all throughout the early 1900s, leading up to prohibition, people were like outrageous with their alcohol consumption. I mean, that's why that's why they make it illegal. All the
temperance movement,
the temperance movement is just like we can't handle this. And I mean, I listened to the stories my grandmother would tell me. Those motherfuckers were wasted back then. Like, and everybody's parent was an alcoholic, and it was just like it was really bad.
Yeah.
Post prohibition, fucking 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, people are drinking at the office. People are drinking and driving.
All day,
every day. It was like a commonly accepted thing that, even at work, you might get a little toasty, and that was acceptable.
Drink driving was when was that banned? At least around here, my dad would tell me stories that in the 70s, late, I think it was like 83 that it was banned. He said in the early 80s, late 70s, he would get in his convertible, buy a case of beer, and drive to the shore on a Friday night, and it would be, and he got there when it was empty.
That is amazing.
What the fuck? Could you imagine? I mean, I'm sure people do it today, but
yeah, of course they do. Of course they do. But back then, it just, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't.
You and everybody else were doing it.
It wasn't even as vilified as it is today. It's. I've always found that to be super fucking interesting. Probably the rampant exploration of drug use in the 60s with its debatable origins, which again is a whole other fucking rabbit hole.
But yeah. Origins had an impact.
That definitely played a role, and all of those things are directly reflected today when we're talking about the liberal use of psychedelics in terms of treating mental disorders and all the different types of therapeutic uses for all these different types of substances that we were previously like, we're never gonna fucking deal with that again. One that's always cracked me up though, and this is hilarious. I just watched, there's a great little Netflix show they made about Purdue called Painkillers.
Okay.
Miniseries, 6 episodes, really, really good. Matthew Broderick's in it. He plays that Sackler guy, but it's a great trip down that road, and it just it talks a little bit about the history, like the history of the Sackler family and the deceptive techniques he used, like the original, father of the Sackler family is his shiesty business dealings. The point that I'm getting at here is cocaine used to be in Coca-Cola, and heroin used to be just like even more freely prescribed than it was just recently during the opioid epidemic.
You have some heroin mixed with some cannabis oil.
Yeah, why not?
Stick a little gob in your mouth, and you won't feel the pain anymore. You'll be all right. Cocaine, all this stuff was, codeine was like absolutely, ubiquitous and things like that for a time. In I think it's in Maywood, New Jersey, which is kind of like by Fort Lee, is the only place that's where they decoconize the cocaine leaves for Coca-Cola, because it still has a bit of a flavor. I mean, it does, but I don't know if you could tell with all the corn syrup and all the other shit in it.
Definitely not.
But they do that there. They decoconize cocaine leaves in a factory in Maywood, New Jersey. Still to this day, and they're the only corporation that has a license from the DEA to do it or whatever.
That is fucking nuts. I mean, what do you know any others of cacao? Any other previous uses?
Cacao or cocaine or coca?
Cacao.
Oh, because like chocolate. Yeah. The chocolate. Yeah. So there's some amazing, the history of that, for the Central American civilizations is absolutely fascinating as well. And, and what happened to it when the Spanish took it from South and Central America back to Europe and back to Spain, and how it went from, what it's indigenous and traditionally used as, to the confection and the sweetness mixed with milk and everything. It's like night and day. I would absolutely recommend getting some raw cacao beans and roasting them a bit if you can, grinding them up with some good hot chilies and some honey and some allspice berries and some, you could do some other things, but I would just start there with a little bit of salt and then just kind of pour some hot water on it and whip it up. And that is an amazing drink. It's one of my favorite things as well.
That sounds fucking
really
delicious.
Good. I'll email it. I'll email you a good recipe too.
That sounds really fucking good.
It's great with milk too, but vegan, just do water. It's absolutely stellar. Really good. It gives you good kind of. I find it's kind of nothing like coffee or tea. It doesn't have. There's a lot of cerebral focus, but it's not any of these kind of sweats and jitters that you can get if you start, having 5 cups of coffee.
I'm not sweaty. I'm not jittery. I'm not sweaty.
What are you talking about? I gotta have another one right now.
And so you mentioned there's pretty big differences between the, obviously there's going to be big differences between the traditional use of something and the perverted use of something. But I guess, how does it get perverted?
Well, I think that's just human nature, especially, I think that's something that's I find kind of sad, in a way, that when I say this, I don't mean it in the literal sense, but as the earth is flattened, and there's so much interconnectivity with commerce and everything like that, there is no, I start going on this whole thing about one world government and one culture and all this stuff like that, but you're not going to have these insular things, and you're not going to have that cross-pollination and things. There is no European chocolate if it doesn't get stolen from
right,
from Central America. It's just not going to happen, And both of them are, I think, good and valid. And I say that independently of any of the history and the murders. It's human nature. If they didn't do it, someone else, I'm sure, would have.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's always so interesting to me too, how so many different things have, even cocaine, the way it's abused now. I'm sure that there were medicinal practices that utilize that plant that were in no way as near as gluttonous as modern cocaine use is.
You still can get coca tea, and I know people, if you go to Iquitos or if you go to, in Colombia or whatever, you drink coca tea when you get there. And I've never been, so I don't know. But supposedly it really helps with evening you out from the extreme altitude sickness. And people, when the Incan, and I don't know if it's Incan or Maya,
they chew on it, right?
Yeah, when they were running on that insane road system they had of runners to deliver messages all over the place, they would just roll up a quid and kind of stick it in their mouth and just kind of chew on that, It's
fucking genius. But that's also it's straight from the source.
Right,
You know, like,
right.
doesn't get more
Pick it off
pure,
the bush,
picked it off a tree. Yeah, you know, it's like right there.
Yeah, there's
Um,
none of this, rolling it up and soaking it in bleach and then basifying it and extracting the, no, none of that.
Another one that always used to trip me out is scopolamine. How like you could just pick a scopolamine. You could go to a scopolamine tree and just pick it off and like it within a few steps have, mind control dust.
Yeah, man. So the third beer that I made was a henbane beer that I made that had scopolamine in it. So
What?
yeah.
What?
This is the recipes from like an insular German community that lived in the Carpathian Mountains in like southern Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania down there. It's a really simple recipe, but you kind of go light on the henbane. But yeah, I grew a bunch of henbane, made the beer, dried it all out, made a 5-gallon batch of it, and yeah, I used to I just give it to people, and it was great. It was things are really weird. How to explain it? So you got, it was like 5%, nothing completely crazy or anything, but I would never have more than like 2.
Yeah.
But things get very weird after you start to have like 1.5. Stuff starts to kind of strobe a bit. You just start to feel like you're like starting to step behind yourself almost in a way, and things get a very odd sheen to them. It almost feels like you're in like it feels like you're in a bit of a waking dream. I don't know how else to describe it.
Wow.
I've never
great.
experienced anything else like it. But
like wormwood or like absinthe level.
So no, nothing like that at all. This is much more serious. This is like closer to like,
DMT
like
or
a
what?
microdose of like LSD or something.
Oh
like
wow, okay.
Yeah,
Serious.
much closer to that than anything else. But
That's fucking amazing.
I would not recommend it, but if you're interested, I would love to make that again as well. So yeah.
And do you think that there were people in like the Carpathian forests just like drinking this shit regularly? And like
These days, probably not.
But I mean, back then
Absolutely.
when this,
yeah,
and it like it makes you think like what they were tripping. They
right.
were just like low level tripping. Like what? How did that affect? How did they even operate?
How they operate? One, then you start. These are some leaps of fancy a bit, but I don't think they're too far off. You start to look at certain areas and certain preferred inebriants in those areas, then start to look at the lore from the area, start to look at the mythology,
Yeah, sure.
places, look at the fairy tales, and look at the things, and all these things are like they're all woven on the same loom kind of thing, and they all come from someplace.
Oh, absolutely.
They're all connected to some degree, maybe
The
tenuously or tangentially or not. But
well, I mean, it's always something I've thought about. As soon as I was old enough to learn what an acacia bush was and what you could derive from acacia, that made me analyze those stories a little bit differently. But I would agree with you, and I would think that it's widely documented at this point. Lots of ancient cultures use this shit pretty consistently in the process of their the daily activities of their society. These were that doesn't matter the nationality, the geographical location. It's like always a part. People find the things that it's a human experience for sure, going back to the first people everywhere. And I just think it's funny how I've never thought about it in terms of the pendulum, but that's actually a really good way to visualize it. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's just funny to see how at one point in time there was like some kind of symbiotic relationship between the herbs and the people. And then over time it got a little out of balance. And then like all these weird societal attempts at correcting it. And now here we are coming back to the source again and being like, oh, all these compounds that we said were completely harmful, turns out they're not. We were just abusing them.
We were abusing them.
We're all fucking addicts, you know.
Right. Or you know, you get into certain cultures or classes of people. You have like the priesthood class who then try to wall up, you know, the beneficial things and keep the knowledge for themselves, and
Sure.
you know, then try to divine that out and down towards the common folk, you know. And then that starts to create rifts between people, their own people and cultures based on a plant. You know, there's the have knowledge and the have nots, and we get to tell you what knowledge is and how you experience it and when you learn about it, and that all gets very slippery really fast, doesn't it?
Well, and it's like even on lower levels, it still manifests itself today. Like the ruling class of this country will tell you, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Never do drugs. Guaranteed, if we were drug testing Congress, or if we look, back through, yeah, seriously, if we looked back through the history of these people's childhoods and college experiences, I guarantee they were all fucking taking drugs.
Everyone's spotless. Yeah.
So, or you know, they just found cocaine in the White House recently. You know what I mean? So like this shit, the double speak, especially of the authority class, saying it's not okay for you to do these things. It's illegal. We'll throw you in jail forever. But if we do them and we get caught doing them, suck my dick. Like there's nothing you can do. I'm just gonna get away with it. Again, that double standard has, to me, I've always seen.
Yeah, I am
level,
not a fan of double standards or hypocrisy. I hate do as I say, not as I do. I just don't, you know. I was just reading a story the other, you know, saying that they found cocaine in the White House, but they can't. They don't know who did it. You know, I was reading a story about. So they only did it with one laptop. I think it was a MacBook Pro, but they had the keyboard, and they had the internal mic and a microphone, you know, like a phone in the room, and they mapped the sound using the two microphones for every key, and they fed that through an AI, and then it could just listen to your typing, and it could say exactly what you typed just by hearing the, you know, the pressure and the keystrokes and the spatial relationship. So they can do that, but they have no idea where the bag of cocaine in the White House came from. And
yeah, right. Exactly.
You could apply that to any governmental bullshit where they completely forget. You know, this is just a very easy example.
And it's right. It just happened recently, but like, bro, let's go look through the goddamn evidence lockups at all the small town DA's offices and police stations. I guarantee you, there's a lot of things that just magically
never goes missing. It's just all hard evidence. You know?
It's just always comical, and I think honestly, like the whole criminal element of inebriates, I think to me it just stems from the let's make it illegal. You can't do it, so then people want to just fucking do it more, and like we have all these like stupid double standards. Like we don't want kids to drink, but we'll advertise alcohol all over the place, and we'll glorify alcohol like it's nobody's business across anything that they're coming into contact with.
That's what I found strange about smoking lately. Like cigarettes are being like banned across. Was it Australia? Like if you're born, I think in like 2025, like you'll never be able to smoke, something like this.
Wow.
But you know, like every like 13-year-old on the planet is like vaping elf boxes, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
How is that any better? You know, it's controlled, but it's way more nicotine. It's got all these combustible chemicals in there. I mean, you know, I'm all for smoking a bit of tobacco if you want, but nothing that's been treated with goddamn runoff from nuclear power plants and all these horrible chemicals. You know, you got to get grow your own, is what I would say. Tobacco is really easy to grow. It's just really hard for soil.
That would be the only way to surefire way know what you're getting. And you know, even that is like your best attempt. You can't be 100% certain about what's in the water or what's in the air. That's in the rain as it feeds the plants. But you know, I don't. Here's another question: do we ever get to that point again? Like, do we ever get to a point again where we can trust the fucking source? You know.
Well, that's. I guess how pedantic do you want me to be? I mean, you know, how polluted is everything? Can you really ever trust anything? You know. But no, I don't know. I would say that the way things are going, without some sort of collapse, probably not. Without some sort of chance to scrap everything and rebuild to some degree, I don't know. It's gonna be hard. I think
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you there too.
it's pretty
And
difficult.
I think people, especially now, I think we're only going to be learning hard lessons. And
Mm.
I think there's a lot of elements of
Who's teaching them then? Who's teaching these hard lessons? That's what I'd like to wonder.
it's the same question I've always had. Again, I understand that um the primary objective is control. Like we need to obey. Order must remain.
Right.
And I can't help but feel like the abundant application of drugs and the abundant availability of drugs is an ulterior motive. Right. It's like
flies in the face of them.
it's being sold to us as like this really progressive ideology about how we should be approaching chemical compounds, which to some extent I'm 100% for. Like I have no problem with the altruistic application of that.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
what I really feel like, and again, I'm just going off history as my gauge here, is it's a goddamn tool to keep us, keep us so fucked up on drugs.
We're not going to notice the other
or
stuff.
our vice that we're helpless to do anything and even be aware.
Right.
Like we're not even aware enough to notice what's happening when it's happening. Because I mean, there are serious conversations now that 20 years ago people said I was a fucking asshole for even thinking. Digital currency. We're there. We're looking at all the different changes that are going to come with the American dollar's supremacy as the world's currency.
Yeah, the BRICS seem relatively more serious than I've ever seen in my lifetime, and in your lifetime as well. To have any sort of challenge to a unipolar America-controlled petrodollar demand, and mandate, rather, I should say. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Yeah, if you're too fucked up to realize it, and then when you stick your head out of the chemical cloud, you just be able to get turned off.
If you haven't already done that yourself, if you like you.
What does that even mean, though? I don't know. You get really kind of philosophical about all this, but yeah.
No, well, I mean, I think one of the reasons that people have used inebriates going back to the beginning of recorded human history is because it in some way, I'm not saying it's the reason we have achieved philosophical thought, but it inspired a deeper look internally at the world around you. It literally forces you to see and perceive things differently.
100%.
And over the course of time, to think that hasn't in so many different ways affected how we are as society now. That's
right
ignorant. Be silly, So it's just one of those things to me where it's always been connected, and it's why I never had a problem. I've never had a problem with shit in reason. Right? Like if you want to do drugs, that's fine. Just as long as you're handling your responsibilities.
Right. You control yourself, harming others. Yeah.
You're doing it smart and safely in a safe environment. I have no fucking problem with you doing that. And in fact, I think on the other end, you're probably gonna emerge with some level of awareness. But it is also really funny to me too, because our society, we need the drugs to cope with our society.
Yeah, like, we're building, as one thing goes up, you need more stuff to deal with the bullshit that's getting thrown at you.
I mean, seriously, and it does not shock me why most people in my generation are entertaining medication, and why every generation after us will be much more open to it, and not only that, using psychedelics as some type of therapeutic medication.
Right, with ketamine and psilocybin now, becoming accepted, not for just the mundane stuff, but helping veterans and
PTSD and all that shit. Yeah,
PTSD and everything. Yeah, absolutely. And those are all, I think, complete. I know people who've done ketamine treatments and stuff, and they're like, just like, wow, if
Well,
I could have
again,
done this 5 years ago, where would I have been?
that's a controlled application of a drug, and I think most people, the excess, especially in America, was just like, I want to be able to do the most drugs.
Oh
like,
yeah, it's just
but you
that's
don't
American
need,
with anything,
yeah, that's you know what I mean. Like
Right.
you don't need to do the most drugs. You can just do a little bit,
A little bit,
and that'll be enough, and that'll be fine. But again, like I understand why a lot of people find themselves down that rabbit hole, because that reality is way preferable to sober reality. And every day, sober reality becomes more terrifying and completely outside of the realm of like something I can do something about. That I
Right,
completely get why people get lost.
Yeah, I think some of this, to kind of poke at one of the things you were talking about. It's like, so you're confronted with this absolute misery. I think it's very interesting that so many young kids are just, when I was a kid and you were a kid, it was like, okay, there's video games. It's like, all right, don't sit around inside all day and play video games. Do something. Now it has become like totally feels like the script is flipped, and so everyone's being pushed to just embrace as much of a fake online video game. Spend all day playing video games and immersing yourself in a VR world. I think that's one of the forks that's being used to just indoctrinate kids at a certain age and younger. It's going to be ubiquitous, and
Oh, dude, absolutely. Every kid's gonna obey the screen.
yeah,
It's crazy. Like, and even I see so many little kids.
I know this sounds like a bunch of old people lamenting the lost time, but
dude,
this never happened
honestly,
in history like this.
We were the experiment. Like, we were the ones, it was dumped on us. Like, we know this shit better than anybody. And like,
We
it
saw
makes
both
sense.
sides. The tail end of one and the start of the next.
What it be turned into. And like, I look at kids now, and if we had access to this kind of technology,
I would be absolutely useless. I would never be the person that I am.
No, exactly. That would be our world. That would be how we interpret and understand the world. Like, you and I can't imagine a world without those things because we experienced it, but they didn't. And they honestly think, this is how it's always been. This is how it's always going to be, or better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I hope neither of those are true, but I don't think either. I don't know about the better parts.
Yeah, both of them become foggier with every fucking day that passes, But this I think is an important thing to, I go back to like Europe and other places in the world where drinking alcohol is something that you're taught to respect a bit more. And you can drink alcohol when you're younger, but you're doing everything else within reason. In America, we do nothing within reason. Everything is in excess.
It's bad. It's horrible. And then when you turn 21, go fucking nuts.
It's totally fine. Drink as much as you want. You're going to a sporting event, you better get into a fight. Hope you get arrested.
Yeah.
Like that's it's just so funny to me.
Drink a bunch of Four Loko and down do Red Bull and vodka with Jägermeister and just go crazy,
Party till you puke, dude.
Yeah, man.
I don't know. To me, it's always been
Coke and then do it again. Yeah.
Anytime I consume any type of inebriate, I want to enjoy it for what it is. I want that particular experience. But the thing is I want to enjoy it. And again, I just the excess of modern society is really kind of antithetical to people, in my opinion, really truly using most of these things in a beneficial way. But it can, I know that it can be. I've seen it have.
I've seen all manner of outcomes from these types of things, from the highest highs and the lowest lows, and and those outcomes being the polar opposite of people's experiences. I know people who are destitute and heroin addicts who are millionaires. I know people who did everything right who are homeless.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Everything right. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. There's nothing right about this fucking society. We drew the short end of the fucking stick. Ain't that the truth?
That's the fucking truth. It is.
All right. Well, that's a great place to end. Mysterious MK, I want to thank you for coming on the show again.
Thank you for inviting me. I mean, we've tried to do this for like a year, I think, or something, right?
Well, hey, look, we made it happen. And honestly, this was a super interesting dive down this rabbit hole.
And we kind of went all over the place. We kind of did bird shot. We shot the rabbits coming out of the rabbit holes with a bunch of bird pellets. But it
was great. It was multi birds, one shot. and we'll have to pick something crazy and we'll do this again. But I want to thank you. Thank you. Stay on here. We're gonna do the credits and then stay on, and we'll talk after. Follow, like, and follow, subscribe. See you, everybody.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The End. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along.